to Mr. Horvath's Rocket Shop. This is where all of my rockets are built, and many of them that don't fly properly end up being repaired. Sometimes it is rocket surgery. So today we are going to get you started on building your own rocket kit. So your teacher should have already passed out this kit. I'm going to guide you through the process of building this, the steps of building this. This is the Alpha rocket kit. It's a beautiful flying rocket. It flies straight if you have the fins on properly, and it goes really, really high too. So you could end up putting a C engine in this and losing it because it goes so high. So one of my favorite builds. But the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to get organized. And how we're going to do that is we're going to take a Ziploc baggie and we're going to place our name in the Ziploc baggie, and all of the stuff that's inside the rocket kit is going to go in the Ziploc baggie. You only want to take out what you are building and what you're using at the time that you're using it. You don't want to spread everything out and end up with stuff being lost. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out the name, the card. That you want to keep this, don't throw it away. It really does come in handy later on when you're trying to figure out how did those fins go on, what color do I want to paint it, how do my decals go on it. So keep this, that goes inside your bag. Also, you're going to pull out your body tube. This goes inside your Ziploc baggie. Don't step on this, don't sit on it, don't bend it, don't play with it. It's tempting to play with it on your fingers. If you bend this, it's going to weaken the body tube structure and your rocket may not be able to hold the weight of the thrust of the rocket. And if that's the case, then it's not going to fly. And it could be dangerous to somebody else. So we always check before each flight to make sure that the body tubes are strong and not bent. So just be careful with this stuff, because the whole goal is to be able to fly your rocket, not just playing with it. This piece, we're going to take this out. This is your sticker. These are your stickers or decals. We're not going to use those right now. We're going to put that aside as well, so that goes in your Ziploc baggie. This little baggie contains your parachute. It has your parachute in it. It has your shroud lines and your elastic shock cord. So that we'll use later. That goes in the Ziploc baggie. This piece of wood these are your fins. This is made out of balsa wood. It's very, very light wood, but because it's so light, it also breaks very easily. So don't break these. If you sit on it, I've seen students put them in their mouth before and they've got holes in them. Just take care of this and leave them in the sheets just like you see them for right now. That goes in your Ziploc baggie. Also, we've got this green tube. This green tube is the centering ring for the engine mount, and this is your engine mount. This is what is going to hold your motor inside the body tube of the rocket. So we're going to be using this today. We're going to be using that. This is the nose cone. That's the pointy end of your rocket, and you always want to make sure that the pointy end is facing up when you're setting this up to launch. So that's the pointy end, and I don't know, I think it's the coolest part of any rocket, whether it's the Alpha kit or the big ones like what's over my shoulder, or even bigger than that. The nose cones are pretty cool. So we're going to keep that safe. We also have this metal piece. This metal piece, I pulled this out because, well, I've kind of made some mistakes in the video, and I got halfway through and the battery died on the camera. So this is the second time I'm trying to do this. So I've already taken this out of the bag, and how I did that is I just kind of pushed this out through the hole, and then I pulled it out of the bag, leaving everything else inside. So put that back in, and we're good to go, except for this thing. this thing. It looks like a straw, doesn't it? It looks like a straw, but it's not a straw. It's called a launch lug. And one of my biggest problems that I have is I always forget to put this on my rocket. It's one of those things that I just forget to do. And this guides the rocket up the launch rod until the rocket can get up to speed so that the fins can start to act to stabilize it. Without this, your rocket's not going to launch. So if you don't have this on your rocket, it's a no-go. All right, so make sure that you don't lose this. Keep it safe. It's small. It's a tiny little piece. It does get lost. I don't have extras. You could use a straw, you know, like Starbucks makes really good straws, and they're made out of like a cardboard. So those are nice, but they're bigger. They're not small like this. Just keep track of it. Don't lose this one. So that's going in my Ziploc baggie. The other thing that is coming out of this bag is the instructions. Are the instructions. You need to have proper grammar. So the instructions are going to be out. We're going to follow those instructions, but I'm going to change the order that we do things because I've done this before, and I know that you're sitting in a classroom and your teachers also have math, science, and English language arts to teach. So we can't spend the entire day doing this. So I divided it up into, you know, shorter chunks so that we can do this over a 5-day period. So with that, you're going to notice that I'm going to be skipping around the order a little bit. But trust me, we'll get to the end of this and you'll have a rocket that is going to be flown. So we will get it all done. All right, so everything is in your Ziploc baggie. Your Ziploc baggie is zipped up. This will have a place that you could store it safely. You know, you've got your name on your Ziploc baggie. One other thing that I would recommend doing is each one of these pieces that you're working with, I would write my name on those pieces, because as you build it, I can't talk and write my name at the same time. So as you build this rocket, you're going to set this off on a shelf someplace to dry, and somebody might come along and look at it and go, that's mine, and pick it up, and it may not be theirs because it looks just like yours. And so it might get kind of confusing, but if you've got your name on it, you know exactly which piece it is. So that's my recommendation for you. Just make sure your name is on each one of these things so that it doesn't get accidentally taken. All right, are you ready to start building? All right, here we go. The instruction manual. I'm going to open up the instruction manual. This very first page just gives you an inventory of everything that we just talked about that's in there. I have broken this down into day one, and this next section down here is going to be for day 2. We'll worry about that later. Right now we're going to start with assembling the engine mount. And the engine mount, to do that, the engine mount is this white tube. And I'm going to place this white tube along the side here just like this so that you can kind of see which one is which. We can compare the graphic this way. And I need to explain to you how they're measuring this. And I'm assuming that you know how to measure because we've already had that measurement unit, so it's time for you to apply what you learned to something fun, right? So I've got my handy dandy ruler, and these measurements, we've got this measurement number right here. It says 2 1/2. That's 2 1/2 inches. Right below it is the metric unit, so it's 6.4 centimeters. So you've got both of those if you want to use them. That's up to you, okay? Whatever would be best for you. The most important mark that you're going to put on this engine mount is this 2 1/2 inch mark. That one's pretty important. So we need to make sure that that one is correct. The rest of them are kind of reference marks, and they don't have to be perfect. But this 2 1/2 inch mark, yeah, that's got to be, pretty close to being right. So how do we measure? Well, we're going to measure, you can see that this line right here is pointing right at the very edge of your body tube. And that's right here along this. So from this mark all the way over to this mark, it's 2.5 inches. So it makes sense, right? I mean, it's not rocket science, right? It's just measurement. Anyway, getting back to it. So 2.5 inches in, we're going to place a mark. I'm going to get my ruler out. I'm going to start at 0. Remember that we always want to start the ruler at 0. You don't want to start measuring from the edge of the ruler. You always want to start at that first tick mark that represents a 0. So I'm going to place that right there, and I'm going to come in 2.5 inches. Sometimes it's easy if you've got a partner that you're working with that can hold these things. So I'm going to come in 2 inches. So here's 1 inch, there's 2 inches, and I'm marking this at 2.5. I'm just going to place a little mark there, right where 2.5 inches is at. Just a little pencil mark. It's almost to the end of the tube, isn't it? It's pretty close to it. So that's 2.5 inches. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the next one from this edge straight into this mark. That's going to be 3/8 of an inch. Okay, 3/8 of an inch. Well, you remember how to find 3/8 of an inch, right? You take that 1 inch and you divide it into 8 equal parts, and then you count in 1, 2, 3, and that will be your 3/8 of an inch. If that's hard for you to do, then you can come down here and look at the metric side, and that's just 10 millimeters. Now, if you remember your measurement unit, how many millimeters are in a centimeter? Yeah, 10. So there you go. I can flip this around, and I can use the metric side instead, and I can just come in 1 centimeter, which equals 10 millimeters. So, all right, that's pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and measure 1 centimeter. Sometimes it's easy to stick your finger inside like that and hold both the tube and this, and then place my mark right there where it says 1 centimeter, which is 10 millimeters. Okay, so we've got that done. So what did we do so far? We measured in 2.5 inches. We measured in 1 inch. 3/8 of an inch, or 10 millimeters. The next one that we're going to do is going to be easy. That's going to be measuring from this corner all the way in here to 1 inch. Okay, so 1 inch in. Place this on the corner. Got to rotate it around, so I'm using the inch side. I'm lining up the 0 mark on my ruler, zeroed out, and coming in 1 inch, and I'm placing my mark. So 1 inch in, I've got my 3/8 of an inch marked, 1 inch, and my 2.5 inch mark, which is right there. It's just on the other side of that ruler. So we've got all 3 of those marked. Again, the most important one is this 2.5 inch mark. We've got to make sure that we've got that one right. Okay, so we did all 3 steps. Check, check, check. Famous coach's words, check, check, check. Now what we have to do is this 2.5 inch mark, we've got to cut a little slit in there. Now this is going to be done with a razor knife, which you don't have. Your teacher may have one. And if you don't have one, you can always borrow one. But what we're going to do with that is we're going to take that mark that we made, and we're going to insert this and just kind of wiggle it back and forth so that it makes a little slice, just like that. See how that's sliced in there? Okay, we don't want it too wide, but just a small little slice. The reason for that is that this motor retaining clip is now going to go inside that hole right there, like that. And when you put your engine in, the engine is going to go up and bump up against that piece of metal to keep the motor from going out through the top, and it's also going to hold it in place from the bottom to keep it from falling out. So that's a pretty important piece. All right, so we've got the engine retaining clip in. We measured our marks. We've got the engine retainer, check. And we inserted that, check. And now it's time to glue the centering ring on top of this. Before we do any gluing at all, we want to make sure that we dry fit everything before you apply glue. Make sure that it's going to fit. You want to make sure that this is going to go on and off easily before you apply any glue at all. If it doesn't go on when it's dry, it's not going to go on when you have glue on it, and then it's going to become permanent. So we want to make sure that we can do this. Sometimes even spending time just developing that muscle memory of how the pieces go together so that you can do this without even looking at it. You could just put it on and off, just developing that ability or that skill. Most importantly, you just want to make sure that it's going to fit. Sometimes these go on a little bit tight and you have to sand the inside of that. Some of them are a little bit hard, so what I would recommend is take your thumbnail and just scrape the inside edge just to kind of flatten that out. It almost makes like a funnel. It's called a bevel, but it's almost like a funnel effect. Turn it over and do the same thing with this side. We're just rubbing the inside of that, and when you do that, that will allow this to slide on and off very easily. Thumbs up? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come over here to this fourth step, and we're going to apply some glue. It shows this, and it shows this going onto the body tube, and it shows it going in to where that 1 inch mark is at. So remember where that 1 inch mark was? It was right here, right? So we're going to slide this in to that 1 inch mark, and we're going to let the glue set. Okay? Now, does it have to be exactly there? You want it pretty close. You want it to be pretty close to the center. You don't want it to be way out here like this, and you don't want it to be way up here like that, so you want it to be center. But if it goes in a little bit too far and you end up covering up that line, it's okay. Don't have to worry about that, okay? So we're going to pull this back. I don't even have to take this off, and we're going to apply glue to it. Elmer's white glue is perfectly fine for this. I like to use this because it doesn't bond up really, really fast, and it works very nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little bit of glue, just a bead of glue around this edge, just a circle of it. Okay, and then I'm going to push this in, and as I'm pushing this in, I'm going to rotate it around a little bit, and you could tell it's getting a little bit sticky already. My recommendation, use a lot of glue, use quite a bit of glue, don't gob it on, you don't need a whole bunch, but use enough so that the glue becomes a lubricant. Now you're probably saying, Mr. Horvath, glue can't be a lubricant. Glue is glue. Glue, if you use a lot of it, reduces friction because it's liquid, right? If you use a little bit, it's going to dry and bond very fast. But if you use a lot of glue, it will be slippery and move around. So a lot of glue in this situation will be good. See, it's already starting to bond. I'm not even going to try to move it now. So I'm done. I'm going to leave that alone. I was going to try to slide this down, but I'm not going to do that. If you made a mess and you've got glue on here, what I want you to do is I want you to wipe off the glue that's on the top of this. You want to keep the top of this clean so that it will go inside the body tube easily. Let me show you what I'm talking about, just so that you understand what the next step is going to be. the next step is going to be to take this body tube and this, and it's going to slide in like that. And we're going to glue that on the inside of that body tube. So if you've got a bunch of glue on the outside of this, it may not fit. Okay? So try to keep that cleaned off. And we're going to take this and set that aside. Make sure, please, pretty please, make sure that this engine mount is straight up and down. Make sure that it is parallel with the edges of that motor mount. Okay? You don't want it off to the side. You don't want it crooked like that. Okay? So straight. You have just completed step 1 of your motor mount build. So we're going to put that aside. I've got my name on it. I'm not going to put it inside my bag right now because that glue is still wet and it could stick to other things that are in there, but I'm just going to set it off to the side. I've got my name on it so that I know whose it is. And I'm going to go to the next step. And the next step is an easy one. We're not going to be gluing anything. I'm just going to put an X on here because I'm done with that step. I am now going to come up and I'm going to work on the fins. So I have to go to my bag, open my bag up, take out my fins, and I can set those down on the table. Now with these fins set on the table, and they're still inside of this, it makes it very easy to do a real quick sand. You don't have to do a big sanding on it where you're taking off a lot of material, but you can just take the sandpaper and run the sandpaper back and forth just until you start to see a little bit of sand, the dust from it, the dust. See how there's some of it there? And you can also feel how smooth that is. You do not have to take a lot off. This is just 2 or 3 seconds. Flip it over, and you're going to do the same thing on this side. 2 or 3 seconds. See some of the dust forming there? Now that just makes it a little bit smoother. Do you have to sand it? No, you don't. You don't have to at all. You could skip that step if you want to, and then we can just pop these out. So I'm going to go ahead and break these out of here, and by putting your thumb on this, you can wiggle those around and pop those out. If it breaks in the corners like that, that's fine. You can throw that away. That doesn't matter. But be very careful with the fin itself. The fin needs to stay intact. I'm just wiggling that around, moving it. Okay. The rest of this is garbage. Please throw it away. Just because it comes out in a pointy end does not mean that it's a toy for you to play with. It's garbage. We need to stay focused on the build so that you don't fall behind. So those pieces, those 3 are your fins. They're all sitting out and they're looking like that. Notice how there's a little bit of roughness on the edges of those. If you want to, you can clean that up. You can take the sandpaper, lay the sandpaper flat, and then run the fin back and forth. Try to keep it straight up and down, not on the side, because you don't want to round the edges. But just run it back and forth a little bit so that the edges are smooth. Just a little bit. And you can see I'm not spending a lot of time doing it, and that's perfectly fine. And we're good. That's all it takes. So I've got one fin done. I'm going to go ahead and do the second fin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good enough. 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 And again, I am not rocking from side to side. I'm just keeping it straight up and down, and I'm going back and forth with it. Okay? Back and forth. Rotate it back and forth. Rotating it back and forth. rotate back and forth. Okay? And that's all we have to do for the fins. We just want to make sure that the fins are square and that there's not any rough bumps on the edges that are going to get in the way of gluing it onto the body tube. Now the next step is I want you to mark your root edge of the body of your fin. The root edge, I have the other camera that just shut off, so I'm going to use this one. The root edge is the edge that is going to attach to the body tube of your rocket. Okay, that's why they call it the root edge, because that's what is going to be glued. So the root edge is the part of the rocket it attaches to the body tube. Okay, so you want to be able to take a look at this and go, okay, this is my root edge, because when you go to glue it, you could glue one on like this, and then you could end up turning around and gluing the other end on like that. Now, would that be a bad thing to do? No, it wouldn't, but that's not how the rocket was designed. So, you know, if we glue it like that, it's going to be the way that it's designed to. So, to avoid being confused and having one glued on like this, and then another one glued on like that, and having it look kind of funny, let's just go ahead and mark the root edge of each one of those. And when we're looking at it, you see that little hole? That little hole that's in there? I don't know if they did that on purpose or not, but that marks where the root edge is supposed to be. So if you remember that, and you always know that that hole is your root edge, then that's fine. Otherwise, what I like to do is I like to take a mark, and I like to place a mark on each side of that so that the root edge is actually marked. And I'm going to do that with each one of my rockets. I do that with each one of my rockets when I'm building so that I don't get confused. Alright, so there's my root edge. I've got this one done on both sides. I know that that's going to glue onto that side. Here's my root edge. That's going to glue in. And I've got this one marked, so I know that that's going to glue in. Okay? And that's it. That's it for day one, guys. So you can pause the video. You can go back and replay parts, obviously, because by the time you get to see this, it's going to be on YouTube, so you'll be able to shuffle back and forth and be able to look at it. I hope that this video has been helpful for you. So what we have done today is we have measured using our measurement skills, and we measured our motor mount. We glued the centering ring on it, and that holds the engine retaining clip in place. We're setting that aside to let that dry, and then we went to our fins. We sanded the surface of the fins down a little bit, and then we just kind of sanded off any rough edges on each one of those. We're not sanding those fins down, we're just taking off some of the rough edges. Okay? And that concludes day one.